Welcome friends to another r/MaliciousCompliance video. Today we've got some awesome stories, including one that involves a landlord trying to exploit someone. But first, a story from Jack93 2008. Don't return a broken controller. Fine, I'll play you at your own game. So in the UK we have the store called Game. I'll spare explaining what they sell, so anyway I was looking through the secondhand cabinet and found an Xbox Elite controller I liked the look of. I ended up buying it and took it home, about an hour's drive away because I live in the middle of nowhere. I plugged it in, excited to make use of the extra features of my new controller, only to find that the A button was mushed in and wouldn't register any input. Clearly broken, as soon as you tried to press it, it didn't click. Annoyed that nobody had checked this before putting it on sale, I traveled back the next day to return it for a working controller. I handed over the controller in the case it came with and explained the situation. They say, "Have you got the charging cable?" This is where I messed up. I left the micro USB cable plugged into my PC. I say, "No, very sorry, left it at home, but you can clearly tell this button is not clicking and it's broken." The cashier, struggling to hide their grin, proceeded to tell me that there's no way of testing the controller to see if it was faulty without the cable. I say, "Surely there's a micro USB cable lying around you can use." They say I still can't return it without the cable. This I get, but I'm asking for a simple swap, like for like. Don't need the accessories, just the controller. He was getting a mad control ego trip over condescendingly explaining the technicalities of store policy. Annoyed with the fact that it was going to be another 2-hour round trip, I left with my tail between my legs, passing that same secondhand cabinet on my way out. That's when the light bulb moment hit. I looked at the Elite controller they'd put in the cabinet to replace the one I had bought the previous day, and looked back at old Smuggins back at the checkout who was elated he had won. Or so he thought. I walked confidently back to the checkout, waited in line and got to the smirking cashier, who now had a confused, slightly worried look on his face. I say, "I'd like to buy one Xbox Elite controller from your secondhand cabinet, please," in my most polite voice, as if it was the first time meeting the cashier. Looking like I'd just asked him for his grandma's ashes, he tilted his head, puzzled, and went and fetched it for me. I paid for my controller, cable and all, and marched out of the store. A little cable swap later, I walked immediately back into the store. This is where cashier and I locked eye contact from across the store, his face even more puzzled than before. I got to the front of the line and was served by the manager as cashier was busy with another customer. I say, "I bought this controller off you yesterday, and as you can see, the A button is smashed in and broken." This is where the penny dropped for cashier, and he figured out what I was up to. After handling the controller, the manager confirmed that, "Yes, it is. Very sorry about that, sir. We'll get that refunded for you, no problem. Do you have all the accessories it came with?" Me locking eyes with cashier at the adjacent checkout, who was clearly listening and trying to involve himself in the transaction. As a matter of fact, I do. Charging cable and all. At this point, cashier was spitting feathers trying to interject and exclaim that I just swapped out the cable 30 seconds prior, but was too busy with a customer who was asking questions about something. The manager says, "Do you want the money going back onto the card that paid initially?" I say, "Yes, please, but don't you need to check to see if it's faulty by plugging it in first?" Still holding eye contact with the cashier, the manager says, "No, that's not necessary. The A button is clearly broken." As cashier got redder in the face, my grin widened until I looked like a Cheshire cat. I thanked the manager for his help and gave a nod to the cashier, and left with my head held high and my new working controller. To some, this isn't anything to write home about, but for me, it was extremely satisfying to see cashier's face at the end of this ordeal. To me, I feel like cashier was being a little too tough regardless. Now, frankly, I get it if this is some kind of like GameStop or something, but honestly, if I was the manager there and I ran a store like that, I would advise my staff that if somebody comes to return something that is clearly broken and they're missing something negligible like a micro USB cable for it, that honestly it's probably just worth it to accept the return minus that cable, because I would think that that customer satisfaction would be that good that hopefully you would generate some more repeat business or loyalty. Do you guys agree that they should have just accepted the return without the micro USB cable? Or do you guys think if you're going to return something, even if it's a negligible accessory, you gotta have everything to return? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And by the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Every single video has awesome stories like our next one from No Panic Prepper. Landlord tried to exploit me for free labor. I'm renting a little house out past the suburbs of the city I'm currently working in. It's a little old and the appliances are a bit dated, but it was much cheaper than a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and I move around every couple of years for work. My landlord lives out of state and doesn't have anyone local, so for the past year and a half, I haven't talked to anyone. Just pay my rent on time and keep doing my thing. About 4 months ago, plumbing issues started popping up and 2 major appliances decided to give up the ghost. I notified my landlord via email and written letter. I rent a lot and have learned to abide by the exact wording in a lease. After several follow-up emails and phone calls, a local handyman showed up to look at everything and provide a quote. After receiving the quote for parts plus labor, the landlord told me flat out that they will not be paying for the repairs. They said that since I'm an engineer, they would allow me to purchase the parts, install them, and then deduct the cost of the repairs from my rent payment. They said it was either this or learn to make do. I was not super thrilled at this response. I replied back to them saying if they were willing to deduct my time and cost of the parts from my rent, that I would get started immediately. Thank you very much. They were thrilled to hear it and asked me to send receipts for the records when everything was finished. Great! Now to put together all the pieces and get to work. The first step was to file for an LLC with my current state. Next, I set up some cameras and borrowed a GoPro from one of my hiking mates. I was able to document all the repair process, from me watching YouTube videos of how to do things, to me making multiple runs to the parts store to get that piece I didn't know I needed. Here's the kicker. At my day job, I make over $50 an hour. That's what my time is valued at. The final bill for everything had worked out to be about 12% higher than the quoted cost, and the landlord is very upset. But my lawyer, added to the email chain, has kept them very civil. I'm almost sure that there was probably some other kind of legal recourse for OP here. I mean, I imagine this must be pretty darn satisfying if you've got the time and interest to do so. Somebody already making $50 an hour might already have that kind of downtime. But I don't necessarily think a landlord can just be like, well, you'll just have to learn to make do without appliances and plumbing issues, and just leave it there. This next story is from Impossible Bear 8953. Us people can't do anything right? Many years ago, think the early 2000s, I worked at a US health insurance company. I'd worked my way through the grunt queues and was splitting my job time between being a patient advocate and a provider representative. Yeah, I know those two are often in conflict, but here begins the story. A local hospital had recently regenerated their contract with us. They were looking to double their pay schedule, and they were one of the only hospitals in the area, so they had us over a barrel. But they were also notorious for screwing up their billing, so some new clauses were added to the contract. Enter Jane, a billing agent from the hospital. She calls in with an issue, and I can tell this woman didn't have her coffee. She says, "You people screwed up a claim. Again! I don't know why you can't just do your jobs and pay us right." I say, well, let me take a look for you and see if I can't find out what happened. Jane huffs and says, "Fine, but you better be fast. I know you guys like to try to make us wait so we hang up and go away." She then proceeds to tell me the date and patient of the claim. I politely put her on hold and look it over, and I start to smile because this is beautiful. I say, "Thank you for waiting. I see the claim denied as provider liable." Jane says, "Which is obviously wrong because we had the surgery authorized and you people screwed up. So just fix it." I say, "As I was saying, this was denied as provider liable. While the patient was authorized for a rhinoplasty, nose job due to medical need, I see the claim was sent by you with a diagnosis showing it was cosmetic." She says, "Well, obviously it isn't, so just click your buttons and change that to the right one." I say, "I'm sorry, it's considered fraud for me or anyone here to alter the diagnosis you submitted. Also, you billed us on the same claim form for a breast augmentation, boob job, liposuction, and facelift, all with the same cosmetic indicators. Jane says, then I'll just resubmit it with a medical code. I say, and it will deny as a duplicate. She says, then I'll pull it back and send a new one in. I say, you can feel free to do that, but please be advised that a copy of this claim and your call notation will be sent to the approval team. Also, please review your new contract for billing guidelines. Jane says, and just what is that supposed to mean? I say, this claim is denied as provider liable correctly, and according to your contract, you are not allowed to bill the patient. So, a letter has been triggered to be sent to them, advising that the services on this claim were denied and they're not responsible for the charges, according to the provider contract. Jane says, what? What do you mean? What am I supposed to do with this bill? I say, I would suggest you work with your financial officers, as this will need to be a full write-off. Click. I then write up the letter for that patient, which definitely isn't a normal thing to do. It may not have even have been sent if I wasn't so cranky at being called incompetent, and you better believe I made sure everyone in provider services and medical approval reviewed every claim for that hospital with a fine-tooth comb, in case us people screwed up again. Honestly, bless OP for looking out here. Although OP said it wasn't a normal thing that they would do and they probably, in most cases, wouldn't send that letter, being that person that does get that letter saying, hey, you're not on the hook for any of this, would be amazing. It would be the cherry on top of how happy I am with my new cosmetic surgery. And our final story of the day is from Firm Heron 3023. My student gamed the system. Once upon a time, I taught at a private school in Japan that was attached to a well-regarded university. It wasn't the JET program, but a similar setup in that native speakers were brought in to teach English conversation, listening and speaking, while Japanese teachers taught English grammar and writing. For those who don't know, many Japanese don't speak much English, but the way it's typically taught, mostly for university entrance exams, most Japanese can read and write English much better than they can speak and listen to it. So one day I get a new student and he immediately introduces himself in fluent American teenager, aka English. He'd spent several years in the US and his family sent him back to Japan to improve his Japanese and prepare him for university entrance exams. He was a cool kid and I enjoyed talking to him about music, television, and cultural things. I also excused him from most activities in my class since they were below his level, and I'd let him read his books in English while I worked with the other students, and he often jumped in as an assistant, helping his classmates alongside me. I also turned a deaf ear to when he taught his classmates dirty words because that is important information, even if it isn't appropriate for me to teach them. One time, I was trying to correct the pronunciation of the word election, as there was an election at the time. Most of my students were pronouncing it as erection, and I was trying my darndest to get them to understand the difference between the two words. The student finally jumped in and explained in Japanese what it was, and after a very good laugh, their pronunciation improved. Whatever works, man. But I digress, everything's great, and we had no issues. I truly enjoyed having him in class. One day, he came in very happy and told me how he finally got out of his Japanese English class. Like I mentioned earlier, students also take English with a Japanese teacher in grammar, reading, and writing. And let me tell you, I fully believe many Japanese have a much better understanding of English grammar than native speakers. Typically, we know when something's wrong but can't explain why. Many Japanese could tell you exactly why it's wrong, but I digress again. Obviously, this class was also far below his level, but his teacher made him participate, and even snatched his book from him and hit him with it when he was caught off task. Teachers hitting a kid isn't unheard of, but not common either. In revenge, this kid does as he's told. He starts participating by constantly correcting his teacher's work on the board, worksheets, etc., all to the amusement of his peers. Finally, the teacher told him to shut the heck up and to just read his book. He only had to take exams, which he was fine with. He's happy, and I enjoyed hearing about how he stuck it to his teacher, a man I rather disliked myself. I don't think this kind of situation comes along too often, but when you literally know the material, I guess even better than the teacher probably does, just imagine how nice it would be to be able to flex or essentially kick your feet up and coast along, not having to worry about having to study or do extra work. you just know it, it's a cakewalk, and you're just gonna steamroll that class. I'd be darn happy too. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another malicious compliance story that was way crazier than any of the ones in this video, click on that left video. Or, if you missed my latest video, check out the one on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.